The sun was a fading ember on the horizon as Sarah and Mark ventured deeper into the Blackwood forest. It was an impulsive decision, driven by Sarah's desire for a unique photo of the ancient, gnarled oaks rumored to stand in the heart of the woods, and Mark's ever-present need for an adventure. They'd parked their car where the gravel road dissolved into a tangle of roots and moss, the familiar world already feeling distant. "Just a quick scout, Mark. Before it gets too dark," Sarah whispered, adjusting the strap of her camera bag. Mark, flashlight beam dancing on the mossy trunks, grinned. "Relax, we'll be back before the spooky stuff starts." But the spooky stuff had already begun. The air inside Blackwood was unnaturally still and cold, muffling their footsteps on the leaf-strewn ground. There was no wind, no distant sound of traffic, just a profound, heavy silence. The trees pressed in, their branches weaving a thick, black canopy that choked out vestiges of daylight, plunging the woods into premature night. An hour passed. Then two. They hadn't found the ancient oaks, and Mark's earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by a prickling unease. "I think we should turn back, Sarah," he said, his voice tight. "The compass is acting weird, and I don't recognize anything." Sarah, who had been peering at a strange, almost perfectly circular patch of bare earth, finally looked up. Her face was pale in the beam of his light. "Mark, listen." He did. The silence was still there, but now, underneath it, was something else, a droning hum, low and persistent, like a massive, trapped insect. It vibrated in their bones, a sound that felt less heard and more felt. They tried to retrace their steps, moving quickly, but the forest seemed to bend and rearrange around them. The path they swore they'd followed minutes before had vanished, replaced by a wall of dense, identical pines. Every direction looked the same, oppressive, dark, and utterly foreign. The humming grew louder, culminating in a sound that felt like it was tearing the fabric of the air itself. Then, it stopped. The subsequent silence was a physical weight, pressing down on their lungs. Mark swept his flashlight around frantically. That's when he saw it. Hanging high between two enormous, distorted oaks, was a bundle of woven twigs and dried moss shaped disturbingly like a human skull. But that wasn't the worst part. Peering out from the center of the gruesome effigy was a single, milky white object. It was small, smooth, and instantly recognizable. "My wedding ring," Sarah choked out, clutching her hand to her chest. She had taken it off earlier, worried about scratching the soft gold while climbing over a fallen log, and had slipped it into the small zippered pocket of her backpack. A low, rustling sound began to circle them, not from the ground, but from the trees themselves. It was the whisper of dry leaves, too many leaves, being dragged along rough bark. Mark swung his light up, his heart hammering against his ribs. And he saw them. The old oaks weren't standing, they were crawling. Their trunks, thick as cars, were crisscrossed with deep fissures that looked like wrinkled skin, and from these crevices, dozens of tiny, luminous white eyes blinked open. The branches, heavy and bent, were shifting, not swaying in the wind, but reaching. They were silent, massive, and inexorably closing in. The light caught on a dark, wet sheen on their bark, and Mark realized the trees were not just in the forest, they were the hunters of it. He grabbed Sarah's arm, adrenaline a bitter taste in his mouth. "Run. Don't look back." They bolted, stumbling blindly over unseen obstacles, the rustling and cracking growing into a monstrous, slow-motion chase. Mark heard Sarah scream, a raw, terrifying sound, and when he dared to glance back, he saw a thick, whip-like root, the color of wet earth, wrap around her ankle. She tumbled, dropping her camera, which shattered on a stone. He tried to turn back, to pull her free, but a massive, gnarled branch swept down with unnatural speed, missing his head by an inch and tearing the backpack from his shoulder. He kept running, fueled by pure, primal terror, until he crashed through a thicket and into a clearing. It wasn't a clearing. It was a vast, open space, and at its center, the earth was turned over in a massive, black churn. In the dim light filtering from the non-existent sky, he saw the faint outlines of objects scattered across the disturbed soil, a tarnished watch, a pair of worn hiking boots, a set of car keys, and countless other small, mundane possessions. Then, he heard the low, grinding sound begin again, much closer now. It was the sound of the earth being moved, the sound of the trees feeding. He tried to scream, but the air was sucked out of his lungs. He was frozen, staring up at the silhouettes of the largest, oldest oaks in the world, whose bark seemed to be weeping a dark, rich sap, and whose roots were now silently rising from the ground around him like the slow, cold fingers of the earth itself. The next morning, 2 park rangers found an abandoned car parked at the edge of the Blackwood forest. Inside, a wallet and 2 cell phones. Outside, in the mud, were 2 sets of footprints. They led 20 yards into the trees, where they simply stopped, as if the couple had stepped into air and dissolved. No search party ever found a trace of Mark or Sarah, only the persistent, heavy silence that always seems to settle over the Blackwood, and the lingering, faint smell of fresh earth and damp, hungry wood.